Today, we are stepping into one of the most unforgettable victories ever recorded. This is the biblical story of David and Goliath, the day a shepherd boy stood before a giant and trusted God to give him the victory. The Israelites and the Philistines were gathered for war in the valley of Elah. On one side stood the Philistine army, and on the other stood the army of Israel. Between them was a champion from Gath named Goliath, a giant of a man, heavily armored and terrifying to behold. For 40 days, Goliath came forward morning and evening, shouting insults and challenging Israel to send out a man to fight him. But every time he spoke, the Israelites were filled with fear and backed away. One day, David came from Bethlehem, sent by his father Jesse to bring food to his brothers at the battlefront. He arrived with supplies for them, and with bread, grain, and cheese, just as his father had commanded. As David spoke with his brothers, he heard Goliath's challenge. He watched the soldiers retreat in fear, and he could not understand why the armies of the living God were trembling before a man like this. David asked the men around him what would be done for the man who defeated Goliath. But his brother Eliab grew angry and accused him of being proud and reckless. David, however, did not back down. When Saul heard of David's words, he sent for him. David stood before the king and said, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Saul looked at the boy before him and said he was too young to fight. But David answered that when a lion or a bear came and carried off a lamb from his father's flock, he chased it down, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. He said the same God who delivered him from the lion and the bear would deliver him from the hand of this Philistine. Saul then dressed David in his own armor, placing a bronze helmet on his head and fastening a coat of mail around him. David tried to walk, but the armor was too heavy and unfamiliar, so he removed it and chose instead the simple weapons of a shepherd. David took his staff in his hand, selected 5 smooth stones from a stream, and placed them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag. Then he approached the giant with only a sling and the name of the Lord. When Goliath saw David, he laughed at him and insulted him, saying he was only a boy with sticks. But David answered that Goliath came with sword, spear, and javelin, while he came in the name of the Lord Almighty, whom Goliath had defied. Then David declared that the battle was the Lord's, and that God would hand Goliath over to him. David ran quickly toward the battle line, put a stone into his sling, and swung it with all his strength. The stone flew through the air and struck Goliath in the forehead. The giant fell face down to the ground. David ran to him, took Goliath's own sword, and used it to finish the victory. When the Philistines saw that their champion was dead, they turned and fled in terror. Then the men of Israel and Judah shouted and chased after them, and the Lord gave Israel a great victory that day. And so the story of David and Goliath comes to an end, not as a story of size or strength, but of faith, courage, and the God who saves by ways the world never expects. If this story has inspired you, share it with someone who needs courage, and remember that no giant is greater than the Lord.